picture this scenario. You're a married couple in 1348, and your entire world exists within the confines of a single room barely larger than a modern walk-in closet. Your husband's elderly father snores loudly near the hearth. Your two young children toss restlessly on their straw mattress just 3 feet away. The pregnant sow that will feed your family through winter grunts softly from her pen in the corner. And somewhere in this maze of humanity, you and your spouse must find ways to express love, maintain intimacy, and nurture the bond that holds your marriage together. This isn't a nightmare scenario. This was reality for countless medieval couples who somehow managed to create thriving relationships despite having zero privacy, zero personal space, and zero opportunity for the kind of romantic moments we take for granted today. The question that haunts historians and fascinates anyone who's ever craved 5 minutes alone with their partner is simple yet profound. How did they do it? Before we dive into these forgotten strategies of medieval romance, if you're curious about the hidden truths of how people really lived throughout history, consider hitting that subscribe button, and please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's incredible that we're exploring these ancient mysteries together from all corners of the modern world, connected by our shared fascination with how love survived in the most impossible circumstances. The medieval approach to intimacy wasn't about finding privacy. It was about creating intimacy within chaos. These couples developed an entire language of subtle communications, coded gestures, and carefully timed moments that allowed them to maintain their romantic connection while surrounded by watchful eyes and listening ears. They became masters of what we might call stealth romance. Think about the architectural reality these couples faced. Even among the wealthy, the Great Hall served as the communal living space where the entire household gathered. Archaeological evidence from 13th century manor houses reveals that most bedchambers contained multiple beds, sometimes separated by nothing more than hanging tapestries. For peasant families, the situation was far more challenging. The single room served simultaneously as kitchen, workshop, dining hall, and bedroom. Every conversation was overheard. Every movement was observed. Every tender moment had an audience. Yet within these constraints, couples discovered something remarkable. They learned that true intimacy had nothing to do with physical space and everything to do with emotional connection. They developed techniques that would make modern relationship experts jealous. Their methods were born from necessity, refined through generations, and passed down through whispered instructions between mothers and daughters, fathers and sons. The timing of medieval romance required choreography that would impress a ballet master. Most households followed rhythms dictated by the seasons and agricultural demands. During harvest time, when everyone worked from dawn to dusk, exhaustion often trumped desire. Winter brought the cold that made undressing dangerous, and the early darkness that compressed all activities into precious hours around the fire. But these same constraints created opportunities for couples who understood how to work within them. Spring offered the best possibilities for stolen moments. As weather warmed and days lengthened, couples could escape to fields under the pretense of checking crops or gathering herbs. The forest provided secluded spots for brief encounters, though these excursions carried risks. Bandits, wild animals, and the constant threat of discovery by neighbors who might gossip or report suspicious behavior to local authorities, made every venture outside the home a calculated gamble. The church calendar imposed additional layers of complexity on medieval romance. The Catholic Church designated numerous feast days, fast days, and periods of penance during which marital relations were forbidden. Advent, Lent, and weeks surrounding major religious holidays were times of mandatory abstinence. Even within marriage, couples were expected to refrain from intimate activities on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. This left only 4 days each week when physical intimacy was religiously sanctioned. But here's where medieval couples showed their ingenuity. They learned to find connection that transcended these restrictions. They developed what we might call emotional intimacy techniques that kept their bond strong even during periods of enforced separation. The pressure created by these constraints actually intensified their connection when reunion was finally possible. Children presented perhaps the greatest challenge to marital privacy. In most medieval households, children slept in the same room as their parents well into adolescence. The concept of separate bedrooms for children was unknown except among the very wealthy. Young children were often oblivious to their parents' intimate moments, but older children posed delicate problems that required sophisticated solutions. The answer was a complex system of education and willful ignorance. Children learned to sleep deeply, to ignore certain sounds and movements, and to understand that some activities were strictly for adults. Parents developed techniques for minimal movement and maximum silence, conducting their intimate lives in spaces smaller than whispers. They created entire relationships that existed in the gaps between awareness. Medieval couples also mastered the art of coded communication. A lingering touch when passing a cup of ale carried meaning far beyond the simple gesture. A meaningful glance across the crowded hearth could convey volumes. A whispered comment about checking the animals in the barn might signal intentions that had nothing to do with livestock. These messages had to be interpreted correctly by the intended recipient while remaining invisible to watchful family members. The bed itself became a marvel of medieval engineering, designed not for comfort, but for creating the illusion of privacy. Frames were built high off the ground to avoid drafts and rodents. Heavy curtains, often the most expensive item in a peasant household, served multiple purposes beyond warmth. These fabrics created psychological barriers that allowed couples to imagine themselves alone, even when surrounded by family members. The curtains muffled sound and blocked sight lines, creating cocoons of relative intimacy within communal spaces. But even within these enclosed spaces, couples had to navigate the physical challenges of medieval life. Bodies that had been unwashed for weeks or months, clothing that served as both daywear and nightwear, and the constant presence of insects and vermin made physical intimacy a carefully orchestrated affair. The luxury of bathing was reserved for special occasions, perhaps once monthly for the wealthy and far less frequently for the poor. Economic pressures also shaped intimate relationships in ways modern couples rarely consider. In times of scarcity, the physical demands of survival could overwhelm emotional needs. Hunger, cold, and exhaustion were powerful dampeners of desire. Conversely, periods of relative prosperity after successful harvests or trading ventures might bring renewed energy and optimism that translated into more affectionate relationships. The role of alcohol in medieval intimacy cannot be overlooked. Beer and ale were safer to drink than water in many areas, making mild intoxication a common state. Wedding celebrations, harvest festivals, and religious holidays provided opportunities for couples to relax their usual restraints. These same occasions often brought extended family and guests into already crowded living spaces, creating new challenges alongside new opportunities. Medieval couples learned to find romance in the most unlikely moments. The shared preparation of meals became opportunities for wordless communication and synchronized movement. Working together to manage household tasks created rhythms of cooperation that strengthened their partnership. Even the simple act of banking the fire for the night could become a moment of connection when handled with intention and awareness. The seasonal migrations of medieval life created additional windows of opportunity that couples learned to anticipate and exploit. During summer months, many families sent livestock to graze in distant pastures, requiring shepherds to sleep in fields. Young men might spend weeks traveling to markets or fairs, temporarily reducing household populations. These absences created brief windows of relative solitude that married couples treasured and planned for. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of medieval romance was how couples learned to create emotional intimacy that transcended physical limitations. They developed deep appreciation for small gestures, fleeting moments, and subtle expressions of care that modern relationships might overlook. Their love was measured not in grand romantic gestures, but in the gentle pressure of fingers intertwined beneath rough wool blankets, in shared breath that mingled in cold air, in an unspoken understanding that certain moments, however brief and however witnessed, belonged to them alone. The techniques they developed, the compromises they made, and the bonds they forged in the margins of communal life tell us something profound about the nature of human connection. These couples discovered that intimacy isn't about the space you have, but about the space you create together, even when that space exists only in the meeting of eyes across a crowded room or the whispered endearment masked by crackling embers. The medieval understanding of marriage as a sacrament created frameworks that modern couples might find surprisingly sophisticated. These relationships weren't just practical arrangements for survival, though they certainly were that. They were understood as spiritual partnerships that reflected divine love itself. This theological foundation provided couples with vocabularies for discussing their bonds that transcended mere physical attraction, creating possibilities for connection that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. The practice of confession added another layer of complexity to these intimate relationships. The requirement to discuss marital matters with a priest created external accountability that could be both constraining and supportive. Some couples found that having to articulate their relationship dynamics to a religious authority helped them better understand their own patterns and needs. Others developed even more sophisticated methods of privacy to protect aspects of their marriage they considered too personal for clerical scrutiny. The role of midwives in medieval society extended far beyond childbirth assistance. These women often served as confidential advisors to married couples, providing practical guidance on everything from contraception to sexual technique to managing marital harmony. Their knowledge was passed down through generations of women, creating underground networks of wisdom that operated parallel to official church teachings. A skilled midwife might teach a young bride how to read her husband's moods, how to signal her own needs without words, and how to maintain intimacy during pregnancy and recovery. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life provided rare opportunities for couples to express affection more openly than usual circumstances allowed. Harvest festivals, religious holidays, and life cycle events featured dancing, drinking, and ritualized courtship behaviors that gave married couples permission to be playful and demonstrative. These celebrations often lasted for days, creating extended periods when normal social constraints relaxed and couples could rediscover the joy that first brought them together. The medieval understanding of time itself influenced how couples approached their relationships. Without mechanical clocks, daily rhythms were determined by natural cycles and church bells. This organic approach to time meant couples couldn't schedule intimate moments with precision, but it also created opportunities for spontaneous connection when circumstances unexpectedly aligned. They learned to recognize and seize these moments with skills that would impress modern efficiency experts. The practice of storytelling provided couples with another avenue for deep connection. In a world without written entertainment, partners often shared songs, poems, and stories as forms of emotional intimacy. The bardic tradition of romantic ballads gave couples vocabulary for expressing feelings that might otherwise remain unspoken. A husband might learn a particular song that held special meaning for his wife, or a couple might develop their own private stories that referenced shared experiences and inside jokes. The medieval kitchen, with its central hearth and communal cooking arrangements, became a stage for intimate partnership. Couples working together to prepare meals developed wordless communication and physical coordination that translated into their private moments. The sharing of food became a love language, with partners saving choice portions for each other or preparing special dishes that carried emotional significance. Even the simple act of grinding grain together could become a meditation on partnership and mutual support. The economics of medieval marriage created bonds that went far beyond romantic attraction. Couples who successfully managed their resources, planned for seasonal challenges, and built prosperity together developed partnership skills that strengthened every aspect of their relationship. They learned to function as strategic allies, in addition to romantic partners, creating foundations of mutual respect and shared purpose that sustained them through difficult periods. The practice of pilgrimage offered medieval couples unique opportunities for intimacy that were impossible in their daily lives. These journeys often required weeks or months of travel during which couples could experience freedom from family and community oversight that was otherwise unimaginable. The shared hardships of travel, the physical demands of walking long distances, and the spiritual significance of their destination created bonds of mutual dependence and shared purpose that deepened their connection in ways that comfortable domesticity never could. The medieval understanding of the body and its functions created intimacy challenges that modern couples rarely consider. The lack of privacy for basic bodily functions, the communal nature of hygiene practices, and different standards of modesty all required couples to develop comfort levels with physical reality that contemporary relationships might find shocking. Yet this same familiarity with bodily existence created opportunities for care and service that could be deeply intimate. The role of music in medieval households provided couples with emotional languages that transcended spoken words. Partners might develop skills on simple instruments, creating private concerts for each other during quiet evening hours. The sharing of melodies, the coordination required for harmony, and the emotional expression possible through music all created avenues for connection that operated below the level of conscious communication. The seasonal patterns of medieval work created natural rhythms that couples learned to anticipate and exploit. The intense activity of planting and harvest seasons required cooperation that could strengthen partnerships, while the relative leisure of winter months provided opportunities for deeper conversation and connection. Spring brought renewal and hope that couples could share, while autumn's preparations for winter created shared purpose and mutual dependence. The medieval understanding of dreams and their significance provided couples with yet another realm for intimate sharing. Dreams were believed to reveal divine will, demonic temptation, or hidden desires of the heart. Partners who shared their dreams with each other created forms of intimacy that transcended physical limitations, exploring together the mysterious landscapes of sleep and subconsciousness. The practice of medieval hospitality required couples to function as unified teams in welcoming guests and managing household responsibilities. These obligations created additional challenges for maintaining privacy, but they also provided opportunities for couples to demonstrate their partnership skills and mutual support. The successful management of hospitality became a source of shared pride and accomplishment that strengthened their bond. And so, as we return to that Yorkshire cottage in 1347, with wind howling through timber walls and multiple generations sharing that impossibly small space, we can finally understand the profound truth that medieval couples discovered through necessity. True intimacy was never about having the perfect conditions or unlimited privacy or romantic luxury. It was about choosing each other again and again in the presence of witnesses who understood that some connections transcend circumstances. These couples created something that modern relationships, for all their advantages, sometimes struggle to achieve. They built love that was resilient, practical, and deeply rooted in shared reality. Their intimacy was measured not in stolen hours, but in the accumulated moments of choosing tenderness despite inconvenience, finding joy despite hardship, and maintaining connection despite constant interruption. Their techniques, born from desperation and refined through generations, teach us that love isn't something that happens to us when conditions are perfect. It's something we create together, one small choice at a time, one quiet moment at a time, one shared breath at a time. In a world that offered them everything except solitude, they discovered that the most profound intimacy often blooms not in isolation, but in the courageous decision to remain tender toward each other no matter who might be watching. The medieval understanding of marriage as a journey rather than a destination, as a practice rather than a feeling, as a choice rather than a circumstance, offers wisdom that transcends the centuries. These couples, pressed together by necessity and bound by circumstances we can barely imagine, created relationships that sustained them through lives of unimaginable hardship and uncertainty. Their legacy reminds us that the deepest intimacy often emerges not from perfect conditions, but from the determination to love well with